evening. I would like to welcome you to the Tuesday, July 12th, 2022 meeting of the Housing and Redevelopment Authority. First order of business, Myra, could you do the roll call, please?
Coulter. Hugheim.
Present.
Lewis.
Present.
Martin.
Present.
Thorson.
Here.
Let the record note that there are 4 commissioners in attendance. There is a quorum.
Thank you. Moving on to item number 2, approval of the agenda. Are there any additions or corrections to the agenda? Hearing none, do I hear a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. It's been approved. It's been moved by Commissioner Hugheim with a second by Commissioner Thorson to approve the agenda. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? The agenda is approved 4-0. Third item of business, approval of the minutes of June 14th, 2022. Are there any additions or corrections? Hearing none, do I hear a motion to approve the June 14th, 2022 HRA Board meeting minutes?
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
It has been moved by Commissioner Thorson with a second by Commissioner Hugheim to approve the June 14th, 2022 HRA Board meeting minutes. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? The minutes are approved 4-0. Moving on to item number 4, organizational business, the HRA assessment. May we have the staff ready for the staff report?
Yep. Thank you. All right. Do you want to start? Ms. Coleman.
Good evening. Erica Coleman, HRA Administrator. We're just experiencing technical difficulties this evening, but we are here and we are ready to provide a report to you on the HRA assessment and presentation. I will kick it to Ms. Carla Henderson here, our Community Development Director.
Good evening, board members. I'm sorry. We are here tonight to discuss development activities within the city of Bloomington, particularly within the Community Development Department. We believe our department strives to provide professional, prompt, and predictable service. So, what began as an assessment of the HRA in terms of what current resources are being used to deliver its mission and whether the HRA is meeting all of the development needs for the city of Bloomington, quickly turned to the Opportunity Housing Ordinance, where we explored all of its complexities, where that work is currently sitting, and where does it belong. We then looked at the Port Authority and their work in South Loop and what it would mean to supersize their capacity across the entire city landscape, including creative placemaking into the neighborhoods. We also asked if the city should explore the creation of an EDA. How do we better serve our small businesses through attraction, retention, and expansion? How do we focus on our neighborhood commercial nodes? So tonight, we want to share and discuss with you the recommendations that came out of the assessment of the HRA by an outside consultant and later tweaked by staff. We sincerely believe that what we are proposing aligns with our mission of cultivating an enduring and remarkable community where people want to be. It also aligns with our core values that transformation will come through collective courage and the willingness to take risk, and that everyone benefits when there is equitable access to opportunity. So again, tonight, my name is Carla Henderson. I'm Director of Community Development. We do have virtually Shane Rudling, who is the Port Authority Administrator, Glenn Markegard, our Planning Manager, and Erica Coleman, our HRA Administrator. So I'll turn it over to Erica.
Thank you, Carla. So I wanted to start with just a timeline. So the timeline starts in November 2020 when I was hired, and I came on as a new administrator in the middle of a pandemic. In that time, it became evident that the pandemic had exacerbated the need to focus on housing navigation assistance, people experiencing homelessness, housing instability, and homeowner preservation, in addition to rental assistance and the creation of housing opportunities. In March 2021, you passed a strategic plan for the organization. That strategic plan aligns with the city's priorities, as well as identifies work along the whole housing continuum, with a focus on operational efficiency. The HRA was established 51 years ago to serve the Bloomington community. However, the community has continued to grow in population and diversity. Therefore, an assessment conducted by an outside consultant was needed to determine if the HRA's mission and purpose have shifted over the years, how current resources are being used to deliver its mission, and whether the HRA is meeting all the development needs of the city of Bloomington. The mission of the HRA is to help provide affordable housing opportunities for those who are not adequately served by the marketplace, to coordinate the city's efforts to preserve existing neighborhoods and promote development and redevelopment that enhances Bloomington. In November 2021, Kirsten Chatfield, LLC, was selected. Kirsten specializes in the facilitation and implementation of commercial, industrial, and mixed-use development and redevelopment projects for public and private organizations. They provide master planning, strategic planning, project management, public finance assistance, and development assessment services for small and large cities. Overall, Kirsten Chatfield, LLC, has worked with over 50 cities, 10 counties, and 35 private companies to meet their development objectives, and specializes in economic development project implementation, tax increment financing, economic development authorities, loan and grant programs, and redevelopment assistance. Kirsten has over 30 years' experience working in and with municipal government in economic development. In May of 2022, the assessment report was finalized to address the overall question, again, to determine if the HRA's mission and purpose have shifted over the years, how current resources are being used to deliver its mission, and whether the HRA is meeting all the development needs for the city of Bloomington, as well as if there is a need to create an economic development authority. So, during that assessment, how she arrived at her recommendations was reviewing almost 30 documents, interviews held with HRA staff, interviews held to evaluate how the HRA interacts with other city divisions and departments, and interviews held with HRA and Port Authority board members. Improvements that were brought forward in the assessment were through the document review and staff interviews that yielded 5 areas: systems, programs, staffing levels, area of operation, and use of outside consulting services. The key takeaways that were identified in the assessment report was no standard to track program impacts, staff involvement, or returns on investment. That Black, Indigenous people of color, and seniors are the fastest growing and most underserved populations in our city. That homeownership programs have a limited scope. That the focus has been on housing and not the commercial nodes and needs. That vacant position of the HRA analyst did leave a gap in redevelopment and economic development work. That the Opportunity Housing Ordinance involves multiple divisions, yet it is not held in any primary division. That public assistance is absorbed by the city and HRA and not the development community. There has been missed development opportunities, and there is a need to review general counsel services. I do want to highlight that the first 4 bullet points were also identified by this board in the passing of the strategic plan. So, the recommendations that I am bringing forward are to focus the HRA's mission towards the continuum of housing and less on redevelopment. What this would include is HRA would focus on housing projects. I have put 20 units or less, but the focus here is missing middle housing. Missing middle housing are different types of housing that are available, whether they are anywhere from 40 units or less in a multifamily development, or double bungalows, single-family housing, townhomes, duplexes, things of that such that allow for greater opportunities for affordable rental and affordable homeownership. And then consolidate the majority of multifamily and commercial redevelopment and business and economic development into the Port Authority. I will focus on those 2 of the 5 recommendations that I am bringing forward. The assessment report does identify quite a few recommendations, but as spoken by Director Henderson here, we are bringing forward these 5 recommendations. That is the recommendations that came out of the assessment report that have been tweaked by staff. We are not making other recommendations. So, the background on the HRA. The HRA is statutorily created, and its purpose is to provide a sufficient supply of adequate, safe, and sanitary dwellings in order to protect the health, safety, morals, and welfare of the citizens of Bloomington, to clear and redevelop blighted areas, to perform those duties according to the comprehensive plans, to remedy the shortage of housing for low and moderate income residents, and to redevelop blighted areas in situations in which private enterprise would not act without government participation or subsidies. With the statutory purpose of the HRA, I am not proposing any change to the purpose of the HRA. Okay, was that the next slide? Sorry, the mouse wasn't working right. It is. So what I wanted to show was the Hra Housing Continuum. And so when this board passed the strategic plan, the housing continuum is what you took into consideration as you were looking at the programs that we administer, the services and the work that is done by the HRA. In this housing continuum, we list the current programs that are done by the HRA from homeless, outside, unsheltered homelessness, all the way to market value homes. Don't know. There we go. So what this slide shows is everything that was listed on the housing continuum with in red the things that I am proposing as recommendations to expand and or add. So homelessness, housing instability, we would continue. Housing choice vouchers, which are FYI and VASH, that's foster youth independence, and veterans supportive housing, transitional housing, navigation services and outreach. I am proposing expansion of those services. This is something that was exacerbated by the pandemic. I am proposing to focus on expansion of that, as well as housing needs expansion. This is currently looking to meet other needs of people that are experiencing homelessness and housing instability in the city of Bloomington. In terms of affordable rental, I am proposing we keep everything that we have: housing choice vouchers, project-based assistance, assisted rental program, multifamily development finance. The role of this board has been with the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, the Hra Development Fund, and the Hra NOAA Fund. I'm not proposing any changes to that. What I'm proposing adding are Port and Hra concurrent meetings. For affordable home ownership, again, keeping rental homes and land trust, and expanding our nonprofit single-family development opportunities to increase opportunities for affordable single-family home ownership. In our market value home and preservation, our home improvement loans, our biennial home fair, energy improvements, expanding upon that in terms of coordinating a lot of the services and referrals and help that people would need. There are some things that we can also do where we can use our HRA properties as a model. We own 41 single-family homes. And when it comes to energy improvements, as we align and make sure that we're keeping in track with our mission, we could use those homes as models to show what Bloomington residents can do and what that cost would look like. Continue our foreclosure prevention and expand down payment assistance, which currently is only funded through American Rescue Plan Act dollars. So it'd be focusing and expanding that opportunity that right now is for 80% AMI households and below in Bloomington. And then you'll see in red service coordination and collaboration, public health, sustainability, and human rights. There are a lot of opportunities and places where we can come together with these other divisions of the city, as well as providing services. So for instance, we have the large Section 8 program, Housing Choice Vouchers. We would like to provide opportunities for when people are able to come in and apply for Section 8, they also are able to get the resources and information about WIC, about food stamps, about childcare, about energy, about daycare. There's so many things that right now people are not able to coordinate that. And if we are able to realign our efforts to work towards meeting the people's needs and putting them on a pathway to rental without a voucher, home ownership, we can do that here in the HRA. So what is the HRA board's role? I am proposing that the role does not change. The HRA board's role currently and proposed is to approve distributions from the Affordable Housing Trust Fund Revolving Loan Fund, to approve distributions of the HRA Development Fund and the HRA NOAA Fund, to approve and continue with oversight of HRA programs, approval and oversight of the HRA budget, authorize acquisition and disposition of HRA-owned land, and collaboration with boards and commissions in fulfilling the mission, of which our mission, as I am not proposing that we change it at all, is to help provide affordable housing opportunities for those who are not adequately served by the marketplace, to coordinate the city's efforts to preserve existing neighborhoods, and promote development and redevelopment that enhances Bloomington. So I mentioned the strategic plan. I want to highlight the strategic plan priorities that these recommendations align with. So under economic impact, education, and health, building strategic partnerships within the economic ecosystem, collaborating and partnering with other boards and commissions, as well as other divisions, is working towards that, as well as engage in collaborative initiatives to expand reach and effectiveness with insights gained. We have gained insights over these past couple of years, and probably a little bit stronger due to the pandemic. We have gained more insights. And so with the responses and with the needs that we have seen, as well as the need for collaboration, this is where we are looking to expand our reach and effectiveness. Engagement and transparency, advance equity, racial equity, diversity, and inclusion through outreach and representation. Again, focusing on those coordinated services and efforts achieves this, but also I want to highlight that this board did move forward and ask for expansion of the board to go from 5 commissioners to 7 to truly have representation of the community in which we serve. That is in alignment with this. Housing creation, preservation, and rehabilitation. We have 3 high-level items. These recommendations are in line with all 3 of those items. Enhance offerings and resources for rehabilitation and renewal. That's the expansion of energy improvements. Integrate resources and partnerships to create and preserve affordable units. That is the collaboration and coordinating and working with the Port Authority, and later on you will see a better visual of what that looks like. And then continuing to support private market development. Down payment assistance does that. Down payment assistance does not mean that the home is necessarily an affordable home. It means that we came in to bridge that gap for that household that is considered affordable for them to be able to not only move to, but stay in Bloomington. Housing stabilization, we're improving access and opportunities to home ownership by working specifically with intention to develop more opportunities for home ownership, as well as down payment assistance, as well as more opportunities for energy improvements to preserve homes and keep people in their homes, and maybe that'll be an affordable home ownership option down the line. And then increase support and service delivery with underserved populations. I really can't stress this enough. Bloomington is 32% people of color. 32. Our largest program has over a 90% utilization rate of people of color. However, our home ownership for at least Black people is less than 14%. We are moving in the pathway that we need to move to increase support and service delivery with underserved populations. We have our seniors. How do they age in place? How do they stay in the community? We are looking to do more of working with them and responding to their needs that have come out of different meetings that we have had as the HRA board, but also through the city strategic planning process and the Racial Equity Strategic Planning Committee. This is a part of their response to that. And then operational efficiency. Enhance organizational and governance structure for high quality service delivery. This is really looking at that and saying, where are we duplicating services? How are we spending the funding? And where can we collaborate and not be by ourselves working in and for the city of Bloomington, because we are one united, not only department, as HRA is a part of community development, but one united city, and we all have a role to play. And so I will turn it to Shane.
Thanks, everyone. You guys hear me okay?
Yep.
Great. All right. Slide, please.
You have it?
Oh, I had it. I don't know how to go back. Can you see it, Shane?
Yeah.
Can he see it?
I can't. Yeah, I can see it now.
Okay.
Great. Okay, so the Port Authority's mission, as you'll see in a minute, overlaps with the HRA's mission considerably. There's things that the Port Authority can do. There's things that the HRA can do. There's a great deal of overlap between the two political subdivisions. They're technically political subdivisions, mostly separate from the city. But the Port Authority has some pretty important powers. And the City of Bloomington's Port Authority was established with the same powers as the St. Paul Port Authority. And those statutes have morphed and changed a little bit over time, but they're pretty broad economic development powers and pretty broad housing powers as well. The Port Authority carries out an essential function of the state when it exercises its power. It's not immune from liability and things like that. The Port Authority mission isn't as clearly stated in the statute as the HRA's mission, but it's not in question about what the Port Authority can and cannot do. Next slide, please.
Coming, Shane.
Thanks. So in a nutshell, we'll focus this part of the presentation on what the port would do. And the port would grow to include 5 FTEs, which it does not have today. 3 of those would come from the HRA, which are currently vacant positions. And when we talked about this, the question really is now, like, if you're going to fill all those positions that have been vacant for various reasons, where would you fill them? Would you fill them in the HRA and do the work there? Or would you fill them in the Port Authority and do the work there? And there's some reasons why this group is recommending that we do that with, under the Port Authority umbrella. All of us are city staff. When it comes down to it, it's just which boards and how the work is organized internal to the city. It would result in 2 new FTEs relative to what we have today. One of those positions was focused on the Opportunity Housing Ordinance. 2 of the new FTEs would work not exclusively, but primarily on business development, expansion, and retention, which we do some of within the city and the Port Authority, but not as much as I believe the Council and Port Authority, I won't speak for the HRA, want to do in the city. CARES Act funding and some of the other stimulus funding has really allowed us to kind of dip our toe in the pool a bit more and do some more of that work. And I think it's something that the Council and Port Authority are very interested in doing. I'm not sure if the HRA received the business survey that the Council and Port did here earlier this year. But it was a surprise to me at how well the businesses were served. The one gap was really growing small businesses, and that wasn't something that was a prominent piece in the report, but it is something that we can do and really supercharge the business development in the city. In order to do this work, we would decrease the HRA levy with a commensurate amount and increase the port levy that same amount so as to not impact the Bloomington taxpayer any more than if you just left the HRA levy where it is. And then some of that funding would go to citywide creative placemaking efforts, which is another important goal for the city to leverage what the Creative Placemaking Commission is doing in the South Loop District and do that citywide. $200,000 a year is a start. We continue to look for more funding on that over time because $200,000 a year is a lot of money. Don't get me wrong, but it is something that the City Council may decide to increase funding from other funds at some point in the future. But at least it'll get the ball rolling. Next slide, please. So there's a Venn diagram. We didn't show that to the City Council. It was something that was requested when we brought this to the City Council. You can see there are a lot of things that both entities can do. They can levy against revenue streams. They can create TIF districts. They can bond. They can borrow. They can guarantee things as we do in development agreements. They can both do housing development. They can both do mixed use development, and they can both own parking ramps. Again, the HRA focuses a little bit more on housing and the way that they're set up in the statute and things like that. One of the things that the HRA can do that the port can't do, that port authorities actually could do until the statute changed, it was a while ago, but they can be a limited liability partner in housing projects, which allows them, that second bullet, to really own housing. And then, obviously the HRA board owns various types of housing. The situation with parking facilities is a little bit different than the way the Port Authority statute is written. For the HRA, there's no bidding required for parking facilities if it's tied to housing. And then if you go over to the third bullet on the Port Authority side in the blue, there's no bidding for public improvements. It's a broader definition of what can be done without bidding if it makes sense to do so. Public improvements include parking ramps and then utilities and things like that. Sometimes the port has done that for mall projects, for example, when it doesn't make sense to go out for separate bids if a parking ramp sits underneath another project. You certainly wouldn't want to have two contractors there. Sometimes there's coordination that is impossible to do if you have an open bid environment and things like that. So that's why that is there. And then the other port powers, business development, commercial development. There is a kind of a tweak on how certain bonds could be issued with geo bonds. The HRA has a version of that too. But really, I mean, it's kind of what you would expect. The port's powers are a little bit more business focused, and the HRA powers are a little bit more housing focused. It's not to say the HRA can't do a mixed use project that has commercial, and it's not to say that the port can't do a strictly housing project. But that's kind of how the statutes line up in broad terms with the port HRA. Next slide, please. So going along with the prior slide that Erica showed relative to what the port currently does and what's proposed to do with the recommendations in red. Currently, the Port Authority focuses on development in South Loop, which is 65% of Bloomington's projected development, at least based on some studies that we did a number of years ago. And I think it's probably due for a recheck on that because there has been a fair amount of development both in South Loop and out to make sure that that fact, or should I say figure, is still accurate. We do commercial and multifamily development in South Loop. The Port Authority can operate anywhere in the city. It's not limited to operating in South Loop. It's just that's where the funding has existed in South Loop through TIF and some other funding sources. They can do business. We do business development, large business, usually in the form of a real estate expansion. Small business, again, we have an open to business program that we partner with Minnesota, the Consortium of Community Development Developers and Hennepin County. And then, of course, the Port Authority was the entity that did the CARES grant and loans during the pandemic. Some emerging and evolving programs that the Port is working on, along with other folks in the Community Development Department in the city, a facade program, small business outreach, and then the emerging project, which is the business incubator in old Fire Station 3, repurpose that building into business resource center. And the Port does creative placemaking in South Loop. what we're proposing to do is to expand that development to citywide, focus on the commercial nodes that are being underserved across the rest of the city. One of the key things here is it would be a one-stop shop for subsidized development. So we make a point here on this is subsidized stuff. So project comes in anywhere in town, doesn't need a subsidy to move forward. That's just normal development that planning handles. But what we do find sometimes is, the HRA doing some developments, just say it's a housing project and the Port Authority is doing it. There's a little bit of, who's doing what, making sure we're all, treating the developers in the same way, and just making sure that there's a level playing field for, fundamentally things that the city with a small c is doing with this HRA support, its city. And we do more business development. Again, we focus still on the large business real estate projects, still do those small business projects, and then we move into the implementation phase on these other things that we're doing and probably other programs that we haven't determined yet. Do more small business outreach, and then staffing the business resource city center in the old Fire Station 3, and then move creative placemaking, at least fund that in part citywide. Next slide, please. And I'll turn it over to Glenn Markegard.
Yeah. Thanks, Shane. Good evening, Chair Lewis, commissioners. I want to talk a little bit about housing, specifically multifamily housing. Both the Port Authority and the HRA have been extremely involved in housing. And if you look at new housing since 2010, the city's actually entitled 4,739 units. That's a huge number. We've had entire decades recently where we've had under 1,000 units for the decade. So a lot of development, and both the Port and HRA have been very involved. Looking at those 4,700 units, over 1,700 have had Port Authority assistance, and over 1,200 have had HRA assistance, the remainder having no assistance. And if you look more recently, since the Opportunity Housing Ordinance was adopted in 2019, we've had a little bit over 1,800 units. And here again, both boards have been extremely involved. Port over 900 units and HRA 538 units. Since the OHO has been adopted. So that's total units, but if you think about it in terms of affordability, both boards, again, are very committed to affordable housing. All projects reviewed by the Port Authority that received TIF have included affordable units. And then for the HRA as well, a very high commitment to affordability. With one exception, every project has included affordable units. The one exception is the Genesee Apartments in Penn American District. So again, since the Opportunity Housing Ordinance has been adopted in 2019, you can see the impact it's had on housing production in Bloomington. These are actual units that opened in a given year. And in yellow on these bar charts, those are affordable units that opened in that year. And you can see the dramatic difference since 2019 on affordable housing production and housing production in general versus before 2019. So we're very happy to report that the city's made exemplary progress towards achieving its housing goals. The Met Council, as you know, assigns a 10-year goal to every city in the region. Bloomington's 10-year goal, 842 units. Just from 2021, 2022, we are 77% of the way towards accomplishing that goal, at least if you look at the total unit numbers. If you break it down by income bands, it tells a little bit of a different story. 60% AMI income band, we're well ahead of the goal. 50% AMI, very good progress. well towards accomplishing the goal. But of course, the 30% AMI band is the hardest to accomplish, and this is where we have the most opportunity going forward to strengthen our programs. So the Opportunity Housing Ordinance, there's a lot that goes into it, a lot that you see, but a lot that goes on behind the scenes as well. It involves a lot of divisions and departments, certainly the HRA, Port Authority, Planning Division, but also the Legal Department and Finance Department are heavily involved. And you can see the big range of duties involved with OHO coordination. And they do span all these different groups. So the recommendation of the assessment is to fill the open position that's currently in place. We feel like that's a very important position and will help to keep the Opportunity Housing Ordinance moving forward well into the future. Definitely that position is very much the face of the Opportunity Housing Ordinance. So recognizing that it crosses multiple divisions, the intent is to allocate that position's time also along multiple divisions. So the assessment, we're recommending 50% of the time within the Port Authority, and that's because if the assessment is implemented, that's where the majority of the TIF and financial assistance involvement would be, and hence a lot of the needs of the coordinator, OHO coordinator. And then 30% of time within planning and 20% of time within the HRA. So I will turn it back to Ms. Coleman.
Thank you, Glenn. And so, with that, I wanted to remind the recommendations that I'm bringing forward to focus the HRA mission towards a continuum of housing and less on redevelopment. Again, in focusing the HRA mission, it's not changing the mission. We are playing to the strengths of that mission, and I'm not proposing changing the actual mission of the HRA. To consolidate the majority of multifamily and commercial redevelopment and business economic development into the Port Authority, that the port would grow to include 5 FTEs, with 3 of those coming from the HRA, which are currently vacant positions, and this will result in a total of 2 new FTEs relative to today in the Port Authority. To decrease the HRA levy commensurate with an amount that is increasing to the port levy, therefore there is not a difference to the taxpayers, and to fund citywide creative placemaking from the new port levy in an amount of $200,000 per year. So, with that, I have a suggested motion as well as time for questions from all of you commissioners. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Chair Lewis.
Yes, I'm going to open it up to questions. We'll start with Commissioner Thorson.
Regarding that, one of the last points on the levy, so you're saying this is like no net increase in levies to the taxpayer?
That's correct.
Speak. They currently, both organizations have maximum levies?
Thank you. Both organizations have the potential to have maximum levies. Currently, the HRA for 2022 is at the maximum of the levy allowed. For 2022, the port does not use its levy at all, so it's not on.
Thank you. And so if our levy were to be decreased and shifted to the port from a financial or legal standpoint, that would just bring up the port's utilization of their levy in a way, right? You're saying they're not currently utilizing it.
Thank you. So it would bring up the ports, it would be able to turn on the port levy, which allows funding for the port to work citywide. The port is allowed to work citywide, but the port does not have funding to work citywide.
So in terms of like impact to the taxpayer, there would be nothing to stop the future HRA boards or this board itself to also continue to utilize the maximum levy. Is that correct?
That is a decision for the board to make when we review the budget every year and review the amount of the levy that is needed.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Are there additional questions? Commissioner Hukim?
Thank you, Chair Lewis. My question is regarding that OHO position specifically to start. I see 50% to the port, yet I'm just kind of curious on how that role is going to work out, because right now the OHO I know is not directed. It's run with multiple organizations, obviously, and it's going to continue running that way. But as a board that helped and basically did create that OHO, I do feel that there's a little bit of, ownership to that in the HRA. And so I want to make sure that the time is spent properly and that HRA has, I guess the HRA staff person or that person still is dedicating to the HRA, because I do feel that that should still be a very important role in the HRA, just because they are most familiar with that, and they are the one who, I know the board is the one who, created it, and I think the staff has been behind it, and so I just don't want to see that position, especially being maybe designated that much to the port.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Commissioner Huhim. So what I do want to add is that going back, the HRA analyst position, which filled the OHO coordination duties, was strictly in the HRA, and had to figure out, with the HRA funding that position 100%, how to try and navigate with the port, legal, planning, and other divisions and departments of the city. What I do want to also add is that in that recommendation approved by this board for that position was only supposed to be 100% funded by the HRA board, or excuse me, the HRA budget, for 2 years. We had a pandemic. We can give ourselves a little bit of grace. So we're coming back to looking at that. So what I want to highlight for this position, because I hear your point and I appreciate that, is that this is making it clear that this is a cross-division position that you have to work with and need the other divisions to get the work done. This does not cut out the HRA. And I also want to state that the staff that were involved in the Opportunity Housing Ordinance were that position. And at the time, the administrator was an interim. So the current staff of the HRA were not actually involved in the Opportunity Housing Ordinance to that extent. But nothing against that, because the impacts that are felt that staff are working on are the increases to portability for our Section 8, are the increases to the opportunities for services, as well as, I won't say oddly, but the increases into some people being able to buy homes and move off of getting that assistance. So this breakdown of time also accounts for, we had a HRA analyst position that we funded at 100%, and we had 20% of an economic development analyst. On top of that, outside consultants. And so this proposal is taking all of that into consideration and really looking at where the work is and how that time should be allocated. And this also has a budgetary impact for the HRA to truly look at operational efficiency and fiscal responsibility.
Thank you. I have just a couple of questions. I'm going to go back to something that you didn't really talk about this evening, and that was with the HRA changing our focus to, and at this point, it was 20 units or less. And you referred to that previously as the missing middle. One of the questions I would have is, how do we address the missing middle? Basically, based on the number of 20 or under projects in the past, what can we realistically expect to see in the future? I think I watched the city council meeting, Glenn, and I think you said you knew for sure there was one previously. So looking at the future, saying, okay, the HRA is now going to address the middle. How do we address the middle? What does the board do? In the past, we've had developers come to us. I don't see how our development role is going to happen now if we have a missing middle that we don't know how to really approach. So I guess that's my question to everybody, very general. But okay, how do we find the missing middle?
Sure, Chair Lewis. Yeah, first I'll address the number side, and then hand it over to Erica. But in terms of the number of developments kind of in that zone since 2010, we've had the one townhome project, 86th and Penn, and then a lot of two-family dwellings, a lot of single-family homes, and then if you go back further in time, before 2010, there were a lot of townhome developments, small townhome developments, kind of in that 5 to 20 unit range. But we haven't seen a lot of townhomes recently.
Thank you, Glenn. Thank you, Chair Lewis, for that question. So one thing I want to tie it to is prior to 2019 and the passage of the OHO, didn't have a lot of multifamily development. And the passage of the OHO meant that we focused and were intentional and put resources behind focusing on getting developers into Bloomington for multifamily development and including affordable components. What I am proposing is that we are intentional and we focus on getting developers into Bloomington that want to do affordable homeownership and rental that are 40, 20 units or less. That's how we do that.
Okay, well, my question would be, how are you planning to find those developers? If we've not had an opportunity to do that before, what's your game plan?
Absolutely. Thank you for the follow-up. So one, I want to start with that how we do that is this board does approve every single year the recommendation for WALT, West Hennepin Affordable Housing Land Trust. We're doing 2 single-family homes a year under that. This board does approve our acquisition and disposition of a land where we do our blighted homes program, where we do purchase dilapidated properties and raise and remove them and then sell that land for homeownership creation. This board also does approve our work with nonprofit single-family development, Habitat for Humanity, MACV, PPL, projects right now that the HRA still works on, follows back up on, because we have that record. So how I'm proposing that we do that is, one, we make it clear that it's our focus. And we bring those groups back together and we communicate with them the same way we did with the Opportunity Housing Ordinance. And some of the developers that are doing multifamily do smaller projects. So that's one way to start out, is to have the game plan of saying we are intentional about this. This is our focus. This aligns with our strategic plan, our city goals, and our priorities. And here's the numbers and the needs as we have identified them. Another thing that is an opportunity is Met Council. Again, when I came forward and started a couple of years ago, I remember having a discussion with you all saying, why do we bear it all by ourselves? There's other opportunities for help, for funding, coordination, collaboration. Met Council is actually rolling out a pilot program for affordable homeownership development, in which only government entities, HRA, can apply for that funding and then work through developers to achieve those developments on a time frame that the Met Council has identified. This is my game plan.
All right, thank you. I have another question, but Commissioner Hukim,
Are you sure?
want to go first?
Thank you, Chair. I've addressed this already, and I want to address it publicly as well. My biggest concern and question is the amount of authority we're giving one authority. When it comes to a board approving plans, things like that, it's a small group of residents with 2 council members, and I just get very concerned on the separation of citywide development going just through one board authority. I understand that we're going to have concurrent meetings, but what really is our board's voice and vote in these discussions? And the reason I say that is because this was part of why there is an HRA board. A board is to be of residents, and it's supposed to be the voice of the community. We offer a voice that the port does not offer. We offer a voice that has specialized in affordable housing, that has specialized in development before. We have a lot of experience. We have people who are applying for these boards based on their experience and their passions. So I just want to know, what is that vote and what is that voice going to be of the HRA going forward? Because I, as I've addressed before, I have I have an accounting brain. I am an accountant. That is my background. So I look at checks and balances, and I'm very concerned of putting citywide control of development at over 40 units or whatever we want to talk about to one authority.
Thank you, Commissioner Huheem. So one, I want to highlight, we cannot grant or take away anyone's authority. We are statutorily created, the HRA and the Port Authority. Within the statute is how we are going to be operating, which is what we do right now. So I just want to highlight that. Two, the position of the Port Board and the HRA Board are to recommend approval and support, because when it comes to tax increment financing, that is the city. When it comes to bonds, that is the city. And so, again, the HRA Board's voice would not go to the wayside. As your administrator, I am not proposing that my board go away. This is a part of my position. This is a part of my passion, and this is a part of my focus. And so the board remains. That's why we are still expanding the board to increase with residents and or applicants that reflect the community in which we are serving and striving to serve. So I will say for the HRA, we are sticking with bringing our voice forward for affordable housing development. Also, the OHO requires affordable housing in developments. At least 9% of the homes, of the units created, affordable at 60% AMI or below. That does not change. And so I just want to highlight that the HRA Board's voice is valued and still included. And in this recommendation that I have, I am not diminishing or limiting the HRA's voice.
I have a question to piggyback on Commissioner Hukeem's. I know it had been proposed that we would have joint meetings with the Port Authority, particularly since they would be in charge of redevelopment. My question is, who will determine the criteria for when a joint meeting will be necessary, and who initiates it? Quite honestly, does the Port determine when they want our voice? That's, it's like joint meetings are great, but I want to know how it's determined when there is an affordable housing piece. Mm-hmm. I want to make sure they come back to us. So how is that determined? What is that? Who initiates it, and how is that going to work?
Well, absolutely. Thank you for that, Chair Lewis. So one, I will bring you back to when we had an HRA analyst. That position, who was the face of the OHO, really coordinated that and brought things forward to the HRA Board as well as other boards or meetings that needed to be. So I will say one, it'll be within the position of the OHO coordinator, which again is why that position is broken over divisions. So what does that mean? That's also your staff member, right? So broken out over divisions, that's also your staff member. Also, it'll be on an as-needed basis. As we are building this, we are looking at what does that mean? We are looking at how can we be, I brought the Venn diagram back up because Wonder Twins Unite. That is how I am thinking of the Port Authority and the HRA when it comes to this Venn diagram and where we're working together, is that we really are going to play to those strengths. And so we will look on a per project basis, but it will be one of the primary functions of the OHO coordination position to look at that. Also internally, as we do now, and we would continue to do, there are staff that meet and discuss developments. That is how the boards get their recommendations. So we are going to continue that, and I would still be the staff that participates in that, or I would assign a staff member of the HRA, which is under the duties that I have. So again, you would have the representation, you would have the voice, and it would be the OHO coordination position that would bring things forward, because the OHO, again, requires affordable component. Did anybody else have anything else to add?
Any other questions?
Chair Lewis?
I saw, who wants to go first? I'm sorry. Okay, Commissioner Thorson and then Commissioner Martin.
something mentioned earlier in the presentation, I believe you answered it later in the presentation, but something mentioned, but I just want to clarify. Something mentioned earlier in the presentation had to do with multifamily development financing, falling kind of jointly under the HRA and Port Authority. And I'm wondering why, is that because the HRA has some kind of unique tools that the port doesn't? Or is it, that's the main question.
Yeah.
In other words, that overlap of authority and legal abilities.
Thank you, Commissioner. So I will say we're the HRA. We are unique. But aside from that, yes. And what that means is, for one, the Affordable Housing Trust Fund Revolving Loan Fund, the HRA actually does take the loan out from the city, who issues the bonds, and then the HRA loans it to the developer. That is a unique position. We would keep that. The HRA has the development fund that we have grown some and used some over time, that we could use some of that development fund for different projects, as well as the NOAA fund. The NOAA fund is something separate that the HRA has put a little money in every single year. We also use that NOAA fund, just a little bit of it, to help with Blooming Meadows, the preservation. So again, we have in this Venn diagram, we have some of the same powers, but because of the work that the HRA has done and what we're building off of, we would still have opportunities and access to a couple of different funding streams in multifamily development finance that we have access to now, that we use now, and we would continue to use.
And Chair Lewis, a follow-up to that. One of the reasons I ask is, as a board and given the responsibilities we have, the fiduciary responsibilities, is it possible we could be asked to utilize some of those tools, approve some type of financing, without really having been involved in the process prior that takes place, where we normally today would be involved as a development moves forward and have great knowledge about that development. And what I hope we won't see is something going on elsewhere under another board, and then we are asked to use one of our tools that's unique to us to fund a project that we really are responsible to the citizens of Bloomington, and we really don't know much about it. Somebody just saying, open up your wallet and give us your money. So that was a big question I had, and I would, and then I have a follow up to that. But if there's any response to that,
Thank you, Commissioner Thorson. So I will go back to the OHO coordination position. Even right now, we don't bring things forward that just says, hey, can we fund this? And we don't know anything about that. We would not start a new practice of bringing things forward to ask for funding that we don't know anything about. The OHO coordination position, that is a part of bringing information forward, whether it's an update, just like we had the update about developments and where we saw all the developments across the city. But there were developments we were not asked to fund, because anything that we are asked to provide any type of support or subsidy to, we have the information brought forward for this board to review and to make an informed recommendation. So no, as your administrator, I'm not proposing that because, again, operational efficiency and fiscal responsibility.
And can I add?
Yes.
Madam Chair, may I? Because I wanted to add, thank you for that answer. One of the things that became clear as we were going through this process is we started to talk about how do we play to our strengths, right? So we can look at the South Loop area and we can see all the development happening, and we were like, okay, that's happening over here. Meanwhile, probably because the pandemic helped kind of magnify the disparities we were seeing, we staff, along with City Council, said, when we get these ARPA dollars, we need to put them towards services for people experiencing homelessness. We need to put them towards a down payment assistance. That's not development, so to speak, but it's working. I mean, we have stories we can share. Administrator Coleman stopped the rehab program because she saw some challenges and disparities. Now we have success stories that those funds are getting to the citizens of Bloomington that actually need it. Not to say, I'm not trying to say it wasn't happening before, but in a very specific way, because what triggered that was an application, quite frankly, that for Administrator Coleman had a lot of red flags, but it met all the criteria. And we could talk about that offline. I don't want to bring that up, but we started to see some inequities in some of the programs that citizens were able to take advantage of while missing what we believe the mission of the HRA is and who this body needs to serve. But the last thing I want to point out is we're going to go into closed session to talk about the exact question you asked. We're going to propose something that we believe will help development utilizing HRA funds, and we are going to have Jason Smith talk about what that is. We're not bringing it to you. We haven't moved forward with it. We haven't done anything with it because those are your resources. And so I just wanted to say that will not change. We will be coming before this commission, this body, to say we have a development. Here's what we think. This is what we would like to do to get your input. We're going to have that conversation as soon as this one is over. So I just wanted to point that out as well. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And again, I just don't want to just become the board that we hear relatively last minute. And again, I'll say this since you brought up the rehab program. That was a decision that was made at the staff level, and the board was unaware until we heard about it quite a bit later. And I would hope that as we transition, if we transition to something different, that there would continue to be significant board involvement in those kinds of what I believe is a policy decision. Kind of a related question. I don't want to take all the time here, but
Sorry.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Forgot he was there.
Is it,
Chair Lewis and Commissioner Thorson, if I might add, just how the Port Authority has traditionally done development projects is a 2 or 3 step process. A lot of times we come in with a term sheet that outlines how a project might be developed. Talk with the boards, the ins and outs. If it has city funding, then we bring the city council in and a concurrent meeting. If they don't, it's just the Port Authority. Again, if it's got a housing focus or HRA funding in it, we would do that the same way. We would bring a term sheet to you along with the Port Authority, preferably in a concurrent meeting, but if the scheduling didn't work out, it would just be in separate meetings. But again, we're talking about concurrent meetings as the ideal right now. And then sometimes we come into an interim step with refinements to the term sheet based on comments or discussions about certain agreements. Sometimes they're phased. And then finally with an approval later. So, I mean, from my perspective, there would be no surprises for the HRA board. We'd continue with that process. It's just that it would include more collaboration between the HRA and the Port Authority. Thanks.
thank you.
thank you. And if I
Commissioner
just might
Thorson?
proceed to the other kind of related question. How did the number of 20, how did you come up with that? Because part of me is thinking that if we're going to really make this transition, in a way, 20 might be too high. And I'm sitting here in my mind kind of thinking, and I know that that feeling might not be shared, but as I just try to think about, well, how did the number 20 come up with? Because if you look at the kind of land that's potentially available, if you look at where the marketplace is and where developers can put together packages that work financially for everyone, so I'm curious about that.
Thank you, Commissioner Thorson. So because I live, breathe, eat housing, I came up with the number that really is the missing middle. Missing middle is usually 40, 20. It's the missing middle. Mm-hmm. We talk about, a single family home, a duplex, or we talk about 80 units or more. it's that missing middle. So I don't want you to get stuck on the number, but the number came directly from me as the administrator, where I was trying to quantify. I felt like if I just put the words missing middle out there, it wasn't really explaining anything. So I was trying to quantify the term.
And as a follow-up to that, can you envision circumstances where there might be a development that's larger, that appears to be a better fit for HRA, or a development that's smaller that might be a better fit for port? And I mean, is this 20 a very strict number? If it's 21, it goes to the port, and if 18, it comes, or are we looking at each one and saying, well, this really seems more like a HRA development because this, that, and the other thing. So maybe we have a neighborhood of micro homes, right, that is strictly housing, and it meets affordable goals and housing goals in a big way, and it's 30 units, but is it really a port thing? So I don't know if I make my question clear, but is it a strict number, or are we going to utilize the strengths of each board on when we start to hit those kind of numbers?
Thank you, Commissioner Thorson. You are correct. One, we will utilize the strengths of each. Two, no, it's not a strict number. Three, when I think about it, I get kind of excited because I think about home ownership. So if there's a 30-unit project that might have a mix of home ownership and a mix of rental, we'll talk about it, but it may be the HRA. But yes, it's playing to those strengths, and 20 is not a strict number.
Thank you. Commissioner Martin.
So generally, and getting to Commissioner Thorson's point a little bit about kind of when we're going to expect to see projects coming through and what falls where, I guess, how are we envisioning, I know obviously council and citywide, we've got this huge 5-year strategic plan that's just coming together, we're putting meat on those bones. Are we going to need to substantially re-envision, the boards, both the Port Authority and the HRA's strategic plans, are those going to need to be developed concurrently to know what's fitting where? Because a lot of that confusion, if we all know what directions everybody is pointed, is going to make sense.
Thank you for that, Commissioner Martin. I would love to develop those concurrently if we need to actually develop separate strategic plans than the city. We could still work together to develop work plans that are addressing and meeting those needs of the strategic plan in which we all worked on. So if we are going to develop separate strategic plans from the city of Bloomington, then working together. But I believe it would be more at the work plan to identify what we would do on an annual basis as it aligns with the 5-year plan of the whole city.
Are there any other questions? Yes, Commissioner Hukim.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just one other question that I kind of got thinking about with this. I think of Lindell Retrofit, and I think of mixed. I think of commercial, and I think of housing together. How does that work? Like, how are we going to envision that? Because I can see that being smaller housing opportunities, but possibly mixing some commercial development in with that, since it is such a major thoroughway in the city. So how does that kind of look with the, I'm guessing, but I don't want to assume anything. That would be those concurrent meetings.
So thank you, Commissioner Huim. I think the point of playing to your strengths, I'm glad you picked up on that, is one here. Just because it's not like because the port staff, the development analysts, will be paid hopefully by the port levy, they can do work outside of South Loop. So if there is a project on Lindell Avenue and it involves housing, and let's say the HRAs, this is what's so great. Like, they can go over and say, okay, Erica can pull, we are in one department. Erica calls it Manager Row. We're right there. Our offices are right next to each other. There's no barriers. And that's really what we want to create is, I need this resource. I know this person can come on this project and help get this over the finish line. Whether it's in the port, planning, or wherever, I'm going to pull from that. We really had to ask ourselves, because we had the 3 vacancies in the HRA, where do we want to build up development? And when we looked at the Port Authority, we thought that may be where we want to build it up. But that's not to say that Erica can't utilize that staff can't come before this board, that staff can't work on a project together, because at the end of the day, it's not HRA versus port versus city. We are one. I always say we are one team. We are Team Bloomington, and we need to act like that, right? So I always tell Erica and the team, we're not in competition with each other. We're here to advance the goals, strategic goals of the city council and our boards and commissions. And so I know it's hard to, because we had to have a number 20, or somebody would have said, well, what's the cutoff number? What is the HRA, is it going to be 25? So I hope this helps explain what we're trying to accomplish here. Old Shakopee, Old Cedar, we want to see that redeveloped. It doesn't matter for me if it's the HRA port or, one of our commissioners. Come on, let's get this thing redeveloped. But we have to have a funding stream. We have to have, some of this just has to be paid for. And we have to figure out how to get creative so that we are playing to our strengths. And that's, I would say, the main goal of tonight.
Yeah, and building off of that, when you think about Lindell Avenue and Lindell Retrofit. So Lindell Avenue Retrofit, I came in while that was at the tail end. Barb Wolf with Special Projects and Initiatives really worked on that, and Julie Farnham in planning really worked on that. But what I will say, what I noticed from that plan was you have a swath of land that could be townhomes. And somebody needs to be dedicated to working through the encumbrances and the requirements to free that land up to produce townhomes. I will say that scenario is more common right now than not. But also, going a little further down, 700 American. We don't know what might be there yet. We know what we would like to see as a board, as a city, but we don't know what will be there yet. And so where this is collaboration. Again, there's no barrier. And really working together with staff who have the strengths, but also alleviating some of the stressors that are on staff right now for the way that the work is divvied up. That's what it would look like on Lindell Avenue Retrofit, where it's not super prescribed, because we have the opportunity and the flexibility to prescribe what would be best with the goal of enhancing Bloomington.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'd just like to add one thing that the real plus I see with this is I see an area on the east side that has been neglected for many, many years that might have some opportunity. So I do appreciate that part of this greatly, because obviously I know South Loop is considered east side, but that's its own little world, really, when we're really looking at Bloomington is we want to be one Bloomington, but we're definitely not there yet. And so I do have the hope that this might get us started there. So
Thank you, Commissioner Hukim. Are there any other questions for staff?
Commissioner Lewis.
Yes, Commissioner Thorson.
Also in the presentation, and help me out with this, but there's some mention of the HRA being freed up, or time or whatever, to provide additional services. You mentioned daycare as one. I forget, quite frankly, what all the other ones were.
There's a lot.
I'm wondering, that to me appears potentially to be a duplication of what happens on the county level. And I'm wondering if that's the best use of limited housing for limited funding for our role.
Thank you.
So I would like a little more explanation of what you're talking about there.
Absolutely. And I can provide you a real life example. What I am proposing is not that we are running a daycare program. What I am proposing that our clients who, I won't do that. I was going to talk about rent assistance. Let's talk about energy improvements, home improvement loans. Clients that are approved for those types of programs because it is by a government entity are now eligible for other opportunities, whether it be at the local level, at county, whether it be at the state level, whether it be at the federal level. They are now eligible to apply for those things. What's happening now, just today, somebody came in who receives rental assistance and said, where do I go to apply for food stamps? And we're scrambling. One, we shouldn't be scrambling, but with the pandemic and trying to figure everything out, things have shut down. But two, what would it look like to truly serve Bloomington residents to have, whether it be a computer, whether it be a Hennepin County representative, like the Open to Business? Hennepin County comes to Civic Plaza and holds a room for people, Bloomington business owners, to come and talk to them. What would it look like to expound on that? So that's what I'm actually referencing. And under this service coordination collaboration, I just want to highlight the reason public health, sustainability, and human rights are all there is because they all are actually working on pieces of housing where they're like, hey, HRA, how can we? And I'm like, oh, we need to collaborate and coordinate a lot better on this. If public health is providing a survey that asks about what are the housing issues, we would like to be on board with that, right? So there are things like that I'm proposing. So I want to be clear, I'm not proposing duplicating services. I'm saying allowing for the opportunity to centralize the resource, to apply for the resource, to know about the resource, which I would have to say is over half the battle, not to sound like G.I. Joe, but it's half the battle. They don't know what they can apply for and where they can apply for it at. That's what I'm saying.
So more of a connector.
More of a connector, and there are, with the opportunity to focus on and be intentional about this, there are other entities. So one in particular is Minnesota Children's Defense Fund. They actually have a whole toolkit that they would not charge us for, that would help our applicants, our citizens, our residents, regardless of what they're working with, know what they can even apply for. So it's something like that.
So just a couple of really, really random thoughts as you're talking here. One is, I guess we used to have a human services department in the city, and we really, am I correct that we really don't anymore?
Correct. We do not have a human services department or division because the assessment did find that that was duplicating services of the county, which is why I'm not proposing going back to that.
So to me, I mean, again, my one concern would just be that our staff, because I can see that being a pretty overwhelming process. It takes a lot of time and a lot of hand-holding. And so, again, drawing away from our primary mission and goals. So I would just point that out as a potential concern. And I do know that for a while I worked at Creekside part-time in addition to my full-time position, and I believe they had county representatives that were housed there. And so that, and I think it went beyond the seniors, they tended to utilize the building. But I always felt like that was kind of a great thing because I know it's kind of hard for people to get down to the county and speak with people. And I might think that a model like that could work pretty well is if we had space for someone like that. And I'll just ramble on to my next one since nobody jumped in and said they had additional.
We'll let you ramble for a while.
All right. If the Port Authority begins to take on more redevelopment throughout the city, there are some really big things the port gets involved in and some things on the horizon that they, I'm thinking of, it's the World Fair, right? As that would be kind of a utilized port staff, and the proposed water park, all those kinds of things that are really huge and complex projects. And again, a concern I would have is that the staff time might not be as available for those smaller projects as we might hope today. I'm not even looking for a response unless you want to, but just sort of.
I do, if you don't mind.
Thank you.
Because if anybody who has worked with me since March of last year knows that small business, local entrepreneurship is what I breathe. And I talk about Chick-fil-A is going to be good. The mall water park will be fine. But how do we get some local vendors in there, right? How do we get local construction companies in there to build this? The expo is another example. And so, trust me when I say that we are not proposing this to then take double the staff of the port and work only in South Loop. I mean, I could not stand here next year before this commission, before the city council, if everybody just was working in South Loop, because, I mean, our name is on this, right? We're recommending, which is why we are all standing here together, because we believe this is the right thing to do. And so I just wanted to add that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? All right, well, I want to thank you there was a lot of clarification tonight, and it was very helpful. I really appreciate that. And hearing that we have no further questions, I would be looking for a motion to support the administrator's recommendations as presented. Do I hear a motion?
Madam Chair?
Yes, Commissioner Thorson?
With some concerns, as I think one should always have when there's a major reorganization, so to speak, I would support the recommendation. I have, over the far too many years I've been on this board, I have often brought up and talked extensively with the previous administrator about whether it was finally time for us to either, us as a city, either via the HRA, is to create an EDA, or just get more active and proactive in redevelopment and small business and so forth. And you know, I think the previous administrator kind of floated it up the pole a little bit. You know, the idea is at time it didn't fly. You've educated me a little bit about how this model can really work like an EDA, but perhaps work even better. And often over time, as we redevelop particularly commercial projects, it is often done to the demise of the smaller businesses. They can't afford the new rents and so forth, or they caught them at a time where they just were out of energy. You know, we can't hang in there, kind of a thing. So I like the fact that we are moving more towards, I'll call it an EDA model, but whatever you want to call it, where it is more comprehensive and it's citywide and it includes small businesses. And so I think there's a lot of potential here, and I think there's a lot of potential to leverage the financial resources of the city and the staff to make some of those things happen. So there again, I would make that motion, again, with the concerns that we all have in
All right, so-
these kinds of changes.
So Commissioner
A very long motion.
Commissioner Thorson has moved to support the administrator's recommendations as presented. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Thank you. It has been moved by Commissioner Thorson with a second by Commissioner Martin to support the administrator recommendations as presented. Is there any further discussion? That would have been a good opportunity for you, Mark. I would just like to echo Mark's comments, because this does look like a really good opportunity now that I understand it more thoroughly. This sounds like a really good direction to go. We'll be watching it closely to see if it works, but it feels like a very positive thing. Commissioner Hukim?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree again with what has been previously said, and I just would like to clarify too that I do hope that with these recommendations that we continue these open conversations and including both boards as well as staff going forward, because this is a big task to overhaul, and I just think that it's how it looks may not exactly be how it turns out. So I think continuing to talk about it, continuing to be open about it, both sides, but just for sure the communication. Just let's all stay on the same page and be communicated, and be included. Not saying that we have to make these approvals, but just knowing kind of what's happening is really important, not only as board members, but as residents. It's just really important for us to know. So I agree. I do support this motion with that whole caveat of just keeping those communication lines open.
Commissioner Martin.
Thank you very much. I won't repeat all of what's been said. And thank you for the thoughtful work on this. This is a whole lot of moving pieces to go from a pile to a really cool engine. So I'm excited to see that. And for just to reiterate something that we touched on earlier, and for the several of people that are watching at home probably, Chair, you mentioned earlier kind of the number of these missing middle projects that we've seen previously. Something I'm most proud of in my time on council so far was getting to pass the work that this body did with the OHO and watch that take off like a rocket ship. And the number of communities around the country we have come to us and say, how did you crack that nut? That's amazing. But on the backside of that now, it really to underscore now landing in this body's lap again is figuring out missing middle housing, which is perhaps even a bigger driver of this housing crisis the country has right now. So I think, again, ongoing communication with the Port Authority, but also with council, because this is a Herculean undertaking that we're going to be asking everybody to do. And what kind of support and resourcing is that going to need moving forward? I just wanted to, that was kind of a nugget hidden in the conversation that might be the elephant in the room. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other discussion before we vote on the motion? Hearing none, I will now call for a vote on the motion to support administrator recommendations as presented. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? The motion passes 4-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, moving on. Now, I am going to be requesting a motion to approve a resolution directing the closure of a public meeting of the Housing and Redevelopment Authority in and for the city of Bloomington.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. It has been moved by Commissioner Hukim with a second by Commissioner Thorson to approve the resolution directing the closure of a public meeting of the Housing and Redevelopment Authority in and for the city of Bloomington. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? The motion passes 4-0. Meeting is again open, and yeah, once we have, then I'll open it up for discussion.
The motion for you.
She's getting them.
All right, I got it, Jason. Thank you.
Okay, I'll get my glasses
Thank you.
back on. Thank you. All right. Move this over here. Do I hear a motion to authorize staff to negotiate a purchase agreement incorporating terms discussed in the closed session for consideration at a future meeting?
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second?
It has been moved by Commissioner Thorson with a second by Commissioner Martin to authorize staff to negotiate a purchase agreement incorporating terms discussed in the closed session for consideration at a future meeting.
You need to talk into the mic.
Oh, now open it up for discussion.
No discussion.
All right, so hearing no discussion, we will now vote on the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion to authorize staff to negotiate a purchase agreement incorporating terms discussed in the closed session for consideration at a future meeting has passed 4-0. Thank you. I'm sorry. Adjournment? All right, thank you. Number 6 is adjournment. Do I hear a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Thorson. It has been moved by Commissioner Hukim with a second by Commissioner Thorson to adjourn the July 12th, 2022 HRA Board meeting. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The meeting stands adjourned.